Good evening, everyone. You're tuned into 6-7 News, where science meets curiosity. I'm Sebastian Barron, and tonight we're diving into a classic physics experiment that shows how motion and force work hand in hand, the Atwood's machine. So now you might be wondering what exactly is an Atwood's machine. Picture this: two masses hanging on either side of a pulley connected by a string. When one side is heavier, it pulls the other up, and both move in the same acceleration but in opposite directions. It's a simple setup, but it reveals some really cool physics behind how forces balance and objects move. In our experiment, we started with a single pulley system. We labeled our two different masses M1 and M2, making sure that M1 was heavier using the formula A equals M1 minus M2 divided by M1 plus M2 times gravity. We then calculated the theoretical acceleration. So this equation can tell us how fast the system should move based only on the difference of the two masses. And then after calculating our first trial, we set up the pulley, placed the heavier mass higher, and let it go while recording the motion. The heavier mass dropped smoothly as the lighter one went up. Then we used our recorded data to find the experimental acceleration and compared it to the theoretical one to see how close we got. Our first setup worked well, but no experiment is perfect. We noticed a small percent error, which likely came from friction in the pulley or slight timing inaccuracies. But still, our results showed that the theory and reality matched pretty closely. We then took things to the next level. We added a second pulley to create two pulley systems. This new setup gave us a new mechanical advantage, but it also made the system more complex. We used a new formula for acceleration since adding another pulley changes the way forces act on the masses. We then repeated the same process, chose new masses, calculated the theoretical acceleration, and ran the experiment several times to get consistent data. But the motion this time was smoother but slower. However, our percent error was increased a little bit, possibly because the second pulley added more friction or because of small misalignments in the string. We also experimented with balancing the masses so that the system's acceleration was almost zero. When the two sides were nearly equal, the system barely moved, which was a perfect demonstration of Newton's laws. When forces are balanced, the acceleration disappears. So overall, this experiment helped us understand not just motion, but how simple machines like pulleys make work easier. Even with minor errors, we saw how closely theory and experiment line up when you apply physics carefully. So what did we learn from all this? That even small setups can teach big lessons. And the Atwood's machine might look simple, but it's a great way to explore acceleration, force, and equilibrium all at once. And that's the physics story for today's 6-7 News. But before we go, my lab partner is standing by to tell you all about the materials we used to bring this experiment to life.
Good afternoon, this is Isaac reporting live from the physics lab, bringing you today's breakdown on our investigation with the Atwood machine. In this experiment, we explored how changing masses affects acceleration using a pulley system with two hanging masses, where the heavier mass pulls downward and the lighter one rises. We started by setting up our motion sensor, attaching it masses, and lifting the heavier mass before releasing it, allowing the system to accelerate naturally under gravity. The goal is to compare our experimental acceleration to the theoretical acceleration predicted by the formula M1 minus M2 divided by M1 minus M2, which tells us that a greater difference in mass should create a greater acceleration. In our first run, the heavier mass pulled the system down quickly, and the graph clearly showed a smooth increase in velocity followed by a gradual slowdown as the masses reached the end of their motion. After recording the data, we upgraded to a two-pulley system to reduce friction and make the motion slower. Even though the acceleration was slightly slower, the data was cleaner and percent error was decreased, proving that reducing friction and improving the setup gets us closer to ideal physics behavior. Today's results supported by Newton's laws, once again showing the data relationship between force, mass, and acceleration. And we also learned how real-world factors like friction and pulley system efficiency affects data. Overall, the lab offered a clear demonstration of applied physics, hand-on data collection, and experimental lab results compared to the theory. This is Isaac with your physics update. Thanks for tuning in.
Coming up, I'm your host, Fernando Torres, and I'll be covering Team 6-7's Lab 7. This week, we worked with Atwood's machine that involved pulleys, gravity, and weights. This device was connected to Capstone that recorded the data onto graphs. We went ahead and set up the experiment by selecting two different masses. The string passed through the pulley and then let go. We used the given percentage error table to calculate the differences, and this was us in action. This was us before starting the experiment, setting everything up. The weights are let go, so they drop and are recorded on Capstone. The next part of our experiment, we added another pulley. We selected two masses for this new trial. We used the given table and formulas to calculate our theoretical acceleration. Then, we used the given table to calculate experimental acceleration and percentage error. Now, this was us in action. Here, we let go of the weights with the second pulley attached to it. Seeing the difference between one pulley and two pulleys was fascinating. The difference in setting them up and calculating the different values was pretty interesting. Thank you so much for joining in on Team 6-7 News, and I'll see you next week. Good night.
Good evening, everyone. I'm your co-host, Mateo Barraza, and today we are going to be going over another experiment from the students here at the local university, UTEP. But before that, I hope everyone's staying inside, staying warm on this cold November evening. But with nothing further, let's get straight into it. So this experiment was using simple Atwood machines, which is like a pulley, something you see commonly every day at the gym, wherever you frequent, you will see a pulley. So in this experiment, we attached a mass 1, which we use 0.012 kilograms, and for our other mass 2, we use 0.015 kilograms. 0.012 and 0.015. So in the initial theoretical, the experimental setup, we put these pulleys on the track and dropped them, measuring the acceleration. And here is our results. So for the experimental, here at the top, we can see the mass 1, 0.015 minus mass 2, 0.012, divided by 0.015 plus mass 2, 0.012 kilograms. All of this is in kilograms, as they explained to me. And you multiply this by gravity right here, and this gave us our theoretical acceleration right there. So they did have a little bit of a margin of error, 17%, which is still reputable, still credible, but this was attributed to things like friction and some of the knots on the rope creating a little bit of a hitch, things like that, but it still came relatively close. And then for our step 2, when we added 2 pulleys to the system, this is what we got. So on our top right here, we see 2 minus m1 divided by the 1/2 m plus 2. And this gave us this value right here, negative 7.54. Again, we calculated using this right there. So, and our final percentage error is represented right here. And to give some context to that number, because it did get a little bigger from our other one, is just there is more pulleys, there is more line, there is more rope. So due to that greater entropy, we ended up with a higher value the second time around, but it was still relatively fine. But other than that, I'm going to give it to my co-host, Oliver Amezquita, to give the rest of the results and give some context to this data. Thank you guys, everyone have a good night.
Good evening, I'm your host, Oliver Mesquita, and welcome back to Late Night 6-7 News. Tonight, Team 6-7 took on one of the simplest yet most revealing experiments in physics, the Atwood machine. The setup might look basic, just two hanging masses, a pulley, a string, but behind it lies the foundation of Newton's laws and how forces create motion. Our goal here was to measure the acceleration of the system, compare it to our theoretical values, and see what happens when we modify the setup. We first started with a single pulley system, just one mass heavier than the other, and using the Pascal motion sensor and the capstone software, we recorded the movement, graphed the results, and everything went pretty smoothly here. The data gave us clean straight lines. Our experimental acceleration lined up pretty nicely with our theoretical one, a low percent error, which is exactly what you want to see in a lab like this. Confirm that as long as friction is minimal and the pulley system can go freely, the math checks out nicely. Then we stepped into the double pulley system, and this is where things got a little interesting. This version showed a lot more sensitivity. Any small misalignment, extra friction, uneven tension in the pulley starts to show up in the results a lot here. We expected it to behave similarly to our calculations, but just say reality had other plans. Still, even though the numbers didn't match up quite nicely the way we wanted them to, the process itself was super insightful, and it reminded us how tiny factors can throw off an otherwise clean system. Overall, this lab showed how theory and practice start to diverge once the systems start getting more complex, in this case adding an extra pulley. The single pulley gave us textbook results, but the double pulley reminded us that the real world is never perfectly frictionless or balanced, apparently. Still, every trial taught us something new about how forces interact and how to troubleshoot unpredictable systems. And that wraps up tonight's report on Team 6-7's Lab 7. I'm Oliver Mesquita, signing off from Late Night 6-7 News. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next lab.